As you know, thousands of people in our region have been displaced by Hurricane Sandy. The damage at this point estimated to cost as much as $50 billion. But who's going to pay? New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has already requested $30 billion in federal aid to rebuild, and that's just for New York. Across the river, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie says he expects Garden State residents to be treated exactly the same way that victims of Katrina were treated. But where is all of this money going to come from, and are there going to be any hassles in getting that money to the New York area? And Congressman, let me start with you. You're both a congressman representing a storm-affected portion of the region, but you also have a sense of what people are saying on Capitol Hill. Is there enough goodwill towards the New York region to get aid that's needed, and do we have any idea how much that might be?
Well, we don't know the final bill, obviously, but it's going to be sizable. And I agree with Governor Cuomo. We don't want to be treated any worse or any better than Katrina, the region that Katrina hit, or Andrew in Florida and whatnot. Look, there's a long tradition in this country, the federal government stepping in to help municipalities, to help states, to help uninsured homeowners, and that's what we'll be looking for. And the good news is, in the Congress, this tends not to be one of those areas in which the fights get brutal, because every member of Congress, every senator understands that there's some natural disaster that could hit their area as well. But
we did have some members of Congress in our region after, I think it was Irene last year, who said, you know what, it's got to be PayGo on the FEMA funding. We got to make sure that we cut certain areas in order to come up with that funding. And I can recall back after 9/11, it wasn't like the blank check that got written by Congress. There does seem to be a little New York, New Jersey, Connecticut distrust by some members in Congress. You don't think that's going to be an issue this go around?
Well, look, if you're from, if you're a conservative or Republican from the South, and you want to choose this moment to go after Governor Cuomo, you better remember that there's a flood or a hurricane coming your way too. So look, the PayGo idea, I support PayGo for normal course of business stuff, but the idea that when a catastrophe ravages the country, we should pay for it by taking away somebody's food stamps, or not building an aircraft carrier that we were going to build, that's just bad policy.
How much are state and local officials sweating this and figuring out how much they're going to get back? Because even before the storm hit, Albany and Trenton and Hartford weren't exactly flush with cash. Neither was New York City or any of the specific municipalities. I mean, the states and the local governments, they need this assistance,
and they'll get it. Ultimately, I believe they'll get it. It really is an act of God. It's not Fort to City drop dead because you were fiscally irresponsible. These things do happen. And yes, of course we're sweating it. Now there's a hole in the budget, and money's fungible only so to a certain point. The feds will come through. I really do believe that.
As long as it's a unified effort from the region, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey, and not necessarily New York demanding $30 billion, but New Jersey only $10 billion. As long as it's unified, it will go through, but it will not be a blank check.
And it's not. I mean, in Katrina, I believe it was a 90-10 split where the feds came in and paid 90% of it. The states came in and paid the 10. The FEMA process is arduous, and for every cup of coffee or whatever you're going to pencil, you have to account for that on your worksheet. So there's certainly not going to be any, much fraud, waste, and abuse, we hope. But these municipalities are struggling. These municipalities are going a lot around the country are going bankrupt. Here we have a lot of issues in Nassau, Suffolk County, even Westchester, Rockland counties. So they need the help from the feds.
Is this just going to be to make things right, or is there any chance this leads to improvements, things like buried power lines, or there's been talk of a retractable levee almost in New York Harbor to try to prevent a flood? Is there any chance of any of this advanced stuff happening?
LIPA could not have done a worse job in communicating with their ratepayers. So we hope that in Long Island we'll see some improvements. Elsewhere, I think it starts with fixing people's homes and making sure kids are in the right schools. And I think they just announced the city public housing projects are now 100% back with power and heat, and then they'll start making those sorts of improvements.
It poses a really important question, though, because yeah, I think most of us agree it's the right thing to do, that in an event of catastrophe, the federal government helps. But no, it's not a blank check. Look, we got to have a conversation about where we're building and how, right? So a lot of FEMA aid will be available for people who decide to raise their house above the flood lines. But look, we have to have a tough conversation. If we agree that the federal government should step in, there probably are areas of this country where you're not going to build. Or if you're going to build, you're on your own. You're not only not going to get private flood insurance, but FEMA's not going to insure you because you can't, you know, again, a lot of people who worry about this stuff don't worry so much about the money, although they worry about that too. They worry about, are we incentivizing, are we making it easier for people to do dumb things?
But there are towns on the coastline who were right in Sandy's path and got devastated by it. But there are, you know, towns in New Jersey that anytime there's a hard rain, they flood up. Towns in Long Island and New York and in Connecticut as well. Would that extend to those areas as well? Would it, anybody in a potential flood zone, or would those be the folks who are on their own?
One of the big bills, of course, is as we think about the fact that we've had 200-year storms in 18 months or whatever, you know, yeah, we got to think hard about hardening infrastructure, right? Burying power lines, moving transformers out of you know, stream beds and that sort of thing. That won't necessarily be something that FEMA dollars help, and the ratepayers are going to need to understand that there's no free lunch there, meaning if you're going to live in a coastal area that is subject to flooding from time to time, there will be costs associated with things like burying power lines.
Finally, Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Cuomo have already suggested, hey, you know what, this is a new normal. We've got climate change happening here, and that needs to be addressed. Is there any chance this comes into the conversation, or is that just beyond our ability to focus on right now?
I think the conversation, what you mentioned before, I mean, climate change, yeah, I think people are certainly talking about it, but infrastructure and changing the floodplain, the flood maps, these are issues that we've sort of put in the back burner to talk about other things. And I think on a go-forward basis in the elections to come next year in the locals and even coming back to Congress and the states, that we're going to be having this conversation. People are going to get up in town hall meetings and talk about infrastructure, which they've never done before. What about my power lines? You never hear about that. You don't hear people talking at town hall meetings about transformers. They're going to be having that conversation now, and it's going to shift.
We got to take a break, and we have to say goodbye to Congressman Himes. Congressman, thank you so much. Best of luck with this fiscal cliff stuff. Let's see if we can get it wrapped up early in December. That would clear off our plates to focus on other things, yours as well. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about 2016. Yeah, it's not too early. It's never too early. The 2012 campaign ended just 10 minutes ago, so it's time to look ahead to the next big election, only 4 years away and counting. Stay with us.